Happy Friday, folks. At least it's not very happy for me because the Red Sox kicked the Yankees' butt yesterday, unfortunately. And that I think pretty much ends their chances of winning the AL East. But we'll start pre-show, and Russ just dropped. Oh, there he is. We'll start with Kevin and a story about snakes.
Snakes, yes. I want to talk about snakes, or in particular, one 5-foot snake. I just got a text from my daughter this morning. Actually, everyone in our family did. And she works for a nonprofit in South Carolina, and she lives down in Spartanburg. And on my text this morning is a picture of a 5-foot snake that they found, her and her roommate, when they came home and found it lying on their sofa. A 5-foot snake. I hate snakes. Like I hate everything about snakes. And my daughter-in-law said, "Well, I'm officially never coming to your house again, Kelsey." I echoed that sentiment. A 5-foot snake, like that doesn't happen in Michigan. Like we do not have 5-foot snakes that sneak into your house and sit and lay on your couch. That's like Goldilocks. Gone awry there. A snake.
Yeah, that's a tough one. But we had a bat get into our hotel room once.
Yeah, we used to up north in Michigan. Bats get into your lake houses and cottages and things. And
getting a bat out, it's not easy.
Yeah, and you know how Michigan people. I don't know that they would do it now, but when I was growing up, how Michigan people deal with bats in the cottages with tennis rackets. I've actually witnessed that. It wasn't a pleasant thing.
Well, a common animal in Western New York are woodchucks, and I get a panicked phone call from my mother a few months ago, saying, and I'm like, basically asking me to head over and find, and I didn't know what exactly it was, and she's like, "There's a woodchuck under my car." I'm like, "Okay, so what?" A woodchuck isn't exactly a snake. It's not going to be like a boa constrictor. It's not going to choke you to death. It's not going to even gnaw you. I think it's probably as scared of humans as my mother is of them. So I didn't get it. And then I was over the one day, and the woodchuck, probably the same one, walked onto the front steps of our little patio in the front. And was just sitting there, probably like waiting for food. I mean, it's a woodchuck. It's not something. It's not a wolf.
Well, the other morning, I live kind of where the suburbs meet, a farm life, and I have a few acres of land, and we have all sorts of wildlife. Skunks and coyotes and deer come by and all that. But the other morning, I was up early and I went outside. My daughter's dog was staying with us, so I took him out, and there out from the bushes walked a raccoon, and just staring at me like, "What are you doing here on my land?" And I had to remind him that actually this is my land that you're on, And he seemed very bitter to see me at 5:45.
Probably not a morning raccoon.
He was just finishing up his shift. Daylight was coming. He
needed his coffee.
Yeah, exactly. And he was just stunned to see me. But in my daughter's house lives a guinea pig, and I think we're fortunate that the guinea pig did not end up as dinner last night.
Yeah.
Snake, a 5-foot snake, I would assume could eat a guinea pig.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So needless to say, Kevin, you're not going to be doing a feature story on Brent Burns and his snakes.
I'm not. I'm not sure he has the snakes anymore. I have done that story in the past. But I think someone told me that, when the kids got older and gone to school and stuff, that maybe the snakes went elsewhere. But I don't know if that's true. I really don't have any idea. So,
Anthony?
Yeah, I have a snake story actually from this summer to piggyback off Kevin. When during the winter, we didn't get around to collecting all of our leaves. We had a big leaf pile in our backyard. So we got out there, started cleaning things out. We discovered a garter snake with its babies back there. Now, it looked like, the guy who normally cleans everything was able to kind of get the snake and move it over the other side of the fence. Well, my wife goes out 2 days later in the yard, and she discovers, we just got our first, we just got the lawn cut, and she goes out there and finds pieces of a snake basically. It looks like a lawnmower may have gone over it. So she has a snake skin. She's showing it to the kids. And all of a sudden, she looks down, and there's another garter snake looking up at my wife and sort of kind of hissing at her as she's holding up the snake skin. And all of a sudden, the snake sneaks up into the siding of our house. Like, all of a sudden, it runs and goes up, and it's somewhere in the siding of our house. So
Hey,
we might have one sitting on our couch.
it's going to be on your couch. I'm convinced of it now. You're going to come.
It may end up there.
She affectionately calls it Astrid. We don't know if it's a girl or a boy. We don't know. She decided to call it Astrid out of the blue. I don't know why, but
Yeah, he's heading to your couch.
You know how a garter snake keeps up its pants? A garter belt.
Oh boy! All right, I got something better than that.
I hope so.
We're in the 21st century, and apparently Nielsen, the ratings company, is not. And so here's a big thing, and I guess it started last October, and I hadn't really plugged into it, but now it's becoming a bigger deal. They don't know how to tabulate online streaming for ratings.
Oh my God.
So here's the thing, and this is when I realized, you could be the NFL and have all the money in the world, but actually the NHL is a better tech league than the NFL. Just because you have a lot of money and a lot of fans doesn't mean you're technologically advanced. And so apparently the NFL is tied into Nielsen, where they really need to prove their ratings, especially since they dipped last year quite a bit. Mm-hmm. And again, dipping quite a bit for the NFL still beats most leagues. Let's be real about that. But they don't know how to calculate their online streaming with Nielsen in regards to Nielsen. And so now those games on Twitter and all those other games now that they've decided was such a great idea, they have a hard time. Apparently they're having a hard time proving it.
I just saw something though along those lines because it plays into it. There's been a lot of discussion now about, and they don't know whether this has always been the case or whether it's just sort of a recent occurrence post Donald Trump, leading up to Donald Trump, and that is that people, they're trying to figure out how many people now are lying when they're surveyed, or if they fill out a Nielsen report.
Right?
Are you actually telling the truth? Are you just saying, impishly just saying something you didn't really watch? Or I always wondered that. I was a Nielsen family years and years ago, and you really didn't want to put down. It was embarrassing that you were watching just trash television. You felt like you should be writing PBS down. I remember thinking that. I didn't, but and so
all be electronic, Kev. It shouldn't come down to a report,
but surveys it is. So.
Yeah.
Surveys.
I know for a fact that I was watching Downton Abbey instead of watching Jackass. So, okay.
I don't know if that makes you any better, Mike, but
well, one pet peeve, and then we'll start the show. One of the MLB at bat and their app is one of the best things over the last few years. It enables me to be able to listen to the Yankee games when I can't get them in on the air over the regular radio. But at the beginning of the Red Sox Yankees series, for the first time, the MLB at bat, I could not listen to. There were no radio broadcasts. There was some sort of malfunction last night, and every game, the audio for both home and away was not available, and they could have picked the worst time to do that. So I'll cut them some slack because it's been a great thing to purchase over the last few years, but your timing was terrible. Anyway. Okay.
That bad, the Yankees lost. I think it's good timing. They
were winning at the time, Russ. So I blame the MLB at bat for me not being able to listen, because God knows my being able to listen had an effect on the game.
Oh, I see.
I don't know. I was too busy watching the Phillies walk-off win against the Marlins. So sorry.
It's against the Marlins, Ed. Don't get too crazy.
Why are you watching AAA baseball?
That's not AAA. Let's be fair.
Hello, Hockey World. Today is Friday, August 3rd, 2018. Anthony?
I'm Anthony Majan from Center Ice Philly Magazine.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
Kevin Allen, USA Today Sports.
And I'm Michael Agello, and this is the HockeyBuzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. Well, for the first week of August, we had some a significant amount of news in the last 24 hours. We'll start with the trade, and we can go on and on with on this trade because I think there's a lot of aspects that we can explore. And last night, the Buffalo Sabres and Carolina Hurricanes made a deal. Going to Carolina was a third-round pick from 2016. Cliff Pugh played for the London Knights and Kingston last year. The Sabres' second-round pick in 2019, third and sixth round picks in 2020, and going to the Sabres is 26-year-old Jeff Skinner, who scored 24 goals last year. Now, Kevin, I'm looking at this from the Sabres perspective. This is sort of like a no-lose trade because I think Skinner, being as young as he is and being, he's a consistent offensive source. I think he's a great addition for them in terms of, putting a scoring winger with Eichel and Middlestad. And if things don't work out, if they don't make the playoffs or don't make a run for the playoffs, because he waived his no move clause to go to Buffalo, they can flip him at the deadline if they can't sign him to an extension. So I think this is a no lose for Buffalo and a pretty good move by Jason Botterill.
Yeah, and I doubt whether they're really even thinking in those terms of moving him. I love this trade from the Buffalo's perspective, and all of a sudden I like what Buffalo is doing. Like, we talked before, I didn't really like the O'Reilly trade. I didn't understand why they felt like they had to move that. There are a lot of teams that have multiple high salaried players, and I sort of liked their center ice if they would have stayed that. Now, saying all that, I like their return on that deal. I just didn't think they should make the deal. But now, in context, with getting Skinner, and the most remarkable thing about what you just said was that he's still 26. Doesn't it feel like Skinner's been around for a decade?
Yes.
He's a very consistent player. He's obviously started when he was a teenager. And I like this deal. I was frankly a little surprised. I thought the yield for Skinner was less than I thought it would be. I mean, he is like, everybody knows what kind of player he is, but he's a consistent goal scorer.
Russ, I thought that the return that they got, and I told you this last night, I thought the return that they got for Skinner now was consistent with the return that they would have likely have gotten at the deadline as a 2-month rental. That's where I'm a little puzzled at this one.
Yeah, I think the best time would have been at the draft. But, you go back and you look at this, because here's the thing. I would have rather turned some of those picks into my players instantly than waiting for a 2020, waiting for a 2019, because you don't know where the Sabres are going to be now. I know the fallback, like I read an article in the Carolina Observer, the fallback is, well, the Sabres still won't be that good, so this will be a high second-round pick. Yeah, you hope. You don't know that now. Jeff Skinner could score 37 goals with them, and then that may make all the difference. Here's the thing from the Carolina perspective. Cliff Pugh is a decent player. He gets a lot of points because he's already had a pro body for a couple of years. He's a big guy playing in the OHL. His speed's good, but it's not great. So I don't know what that means going forward with today's NHL as we keep ramping up with speed every couple of years. Mm-hmm. So the return's okay. Like, again, a 2020 I don't love. I can't believe they couldn't even get a conditional first. If Skinner signed with them long term, you couldn't get a conditional first. Like that to me is a little surprising. The other thing is Don Meehan made sure to say that Jeff Skinner never asked to be traded. And I think this is the part that's rubbing the fan base the wrong way. Because, again, now this is the last guy that they've moved out that everybody loves there. And now fans really don't know what kind of team they have. They don't know who to root for yet. I know Carolina's hoping that Svechnikov is a superstar.
Right.
But you just took out 30 guaranteed goals, and you're going to replace that with, a young Svechnikov and Netjes, and you're hoping you're going to get those goals back. In the first year, they may not.
What's interesting about this is how often do you hear a GM in all sports say, we're not going to make a trade just to make a trade. We're not going to have change just for change's sake. But right. Essentially, Don Waddell has said that this was a trade for trade or change's sake.
Yeah.
That we needed to change what we had wasn't working. We just felt that we needed a change look, and probably he did too. And so that's what they, made the deal. Now, I guess we're going to have to wait and see whether that philosophy is going to pay off. But certainly everybody knew they were going to trade Skinner. It was talked about a lot at the draft. There weren't as many people competing for that deal as I think the Hurricanes originally thought there would be. So, it's a good fit for the Sabres, and I think the Hurricanes are kind of happy to sort of move on, have more cap space. They like the sort of new look they now have with the changes they've made, and we'll have to see. I mean, where does this leave both of these teams? Like, I think Hurricanes are exactly where they were last year, where maybe this is the year they sort of move up, and maybe it isn't. And, Buffalo, where I thought, still feel it's going to take a while. I'm really bullish on them because I like the Middlestat-Eichel connection, and I like some of their younger players. And obviously, we know they've added Dahlin. And
with Middlestat with Skinner now, let him bring him along. That'd be great.
Yeah. No, so could they? Here's the question: could they possibly compete for a playoff spot?
I don't know, and I want to get Anthony's thoughts on this, but I'll just tell you from the Buffalo perspective here. I look at them and I'm like, yeah, I'm impressed with adding Berglund, adding Svobotka to like sort of the middle, maybe second, third line. That I think that gives them some experience. I think Middlestat's ready to blossom in his rookie year. It was very impressive at the end of the year. And Eichel, if he can stay healthy, Oppozo stay healthy. There's a lot of stay healthies on this team. But Skinner is a good add. My question is, now your goaltending tandem is an inexperienced Linus Ullmark with Carter Hutton, and I don't care what Carter Hutton did last year. I still consider Carter Hutton sort of a 1B type of goaltender. I don't think he can handle 50, 55 games. I think Ullmark is the guy who they see as the future number one. So at best it's going to be a tandem, and their defense past Ristolainen and Dahlin is very questionable. So I think those factors keep them out on the outside looking into the playoffs, but they have made progress. Now, Anthony, what did you think of this deal?
My thought on it was, again, and as much as I like Jeff Skinner as a scorer, he's not what we would call certainly a complete forward, doesn't bite back hard defensively. And I think that does play a role in regards to the return. And and again, as we said, teams knew that the Sabres were out shopping him. So once you kind of know that and it's out there already, it gets a little bit difficult sometimes to get what you believe is going to be the exact return you're looking for. Russ, I don't think they were going to necessarily get a conditional first per se on this. I really think that actually when it comes in terms of the picks, getting that second rounder, especially, I know it's a little bit of a gamble here to see if the Sabres don't improve, then that second round pick is a high second round pick. So there's a decent chance that could be a good commodity for the Sabres, either you taking that pick or using that if, let's say, they're in for the Hurricanes, if they're doing a little better than expected. Overall, I think if I'm looking at their total lineup right now from the Sabres perspective, again, having Sheary potentially on a second line in this case and not as a first line player, you're playing him, Skinner with Eichel. It's this Sabres team. I actually do really like how they're structured now. That Berglund now, as Kevin alluded to with regards to the O'Reilly deal, Berglund fits in that third line center role, whereas O'Reilly's more of a second line center. So if you got Middlestat, he now fits more seamlessly in a second line role. There's some concerns defensively. Bogosian could be certainly a little bit better, but
I'm not even factoring him in because he can't stay healthy. But
if he does, then I think he's a legit number. Behind Ristolainen and Dahlin, I think he's a legit number 3, and then they got to figure it out from there. I think
could be a big plus for them if Brendan Gooley has matured enough to really be able to play in the NHL and play that same offensive game he played in the AHL. That may be enough for them to be at least a contender late in the season.
Yeah, but to your point, Anthony, the fact that they've added Middlestat, who is I think is a great skater, and Sheary and now Skinner. I mean, the criticism of the Sabres last year was they were pretty slow afoot. They're not slow afoot any longer, and now I think they're making inroads to catching up to Tampa and Toronto, and to maybe a little bit to a lesser extent Boston, because those teams have really speedy guys. Now, Kevin, the thing I immediately thought when this trade went down is the person who had to be pissed off the most at this deal was Mark Bergevin, the GM of the Montreal Canadiens, because he's been trying to trade Pacioretty. I read there was an article in the Montreal Gazette earlier in the week that said that it's broken, that he's not going to sign an extension there. He's basically a 1-year rental, and they want to trade him before the beginning of the season. And the return that Carolina got for Skinner, if other teams are using that as a base to offer to Pacioretty, this is not going to get what Bergevin wants in return for his team captain.
Well, yes and no, but I think Pacioretty is a much different player, and you factor in his leadership ability and the fact his scoring level is at much higher. He's a more dangerous player, I think people would say. So, yeah, I still think that's going to get done. And there's so many teams looking for scoring. I think they have more options for Pacioretty than Carolina had for Skinner. So I still think there's time. I mean, the days when you had to get everything done in the draft, I've had several general managers tell me that those days are gone. You start to leave money aside because oftentimes there are some bargains that are floating around out there that you can get. And part of the strategy is just to sort of do that. Or, and some teams may still need some time to move a couple of players that they're still, talking to other teams. So I wouldn't, if I was Montreal fan base, I wouldn't be too concerned about, they would like to have had it done by now, but I still think they can get it done.
Now, Russ, I know you referenced a report regarding the Hurricanes. I think it was the one that I read from, I think it was Luke Ducock of the, I think it's Riley Observer. Yeah. But he talked, or in the conference call with Don Waddell, the question of Justin Falk was brought up. Now, it's a little different with Falk because Falk has 2 years left this year and next before he becomes a UFA. But it continues to be out there that, they, as part of this like change of just completely changeover of the Hurricanes, that he's the next to go. And I do know, and I'm going to write about this today, with the Leafs having $14 million in available cap space and a definite need for defense, I continue to go back to Falk to Toronto because it just makes too much sense.
I don't think Falk's going anywhere until the deadline, though. I don't. I think he's safe right now. I think they want to see what their youngsters look like, give Brind'Amour a chance to see what really that team looks like defensively. Hayden Fleury, he played a lot last year. Is he going to continue to get better? At some point, Jake Bean's going to come in there, and that's where Falk, will be expendable. But they may go the whole year and not trade Falk. That wouldn't shock me because Waddell, the way I read that quote was, yeah, we kind of wanted to trade Falk and Skinner, but now that we've traded Skinner, we're good.
What do you believe in Fleury, Russ?
Yeah, I do. I think he could be a really decent defenseman. Whether he's going to be somewhere in that bottom four in the pairing, that's what it'll be. But he's a pretty good skater for a guy his size. He really has decent stick skills. He's not going to score a ton of goals, not going to be anything like that. But he can move the puck and he can lay hits. And I think he's a better Jamie Alexiak kind of player.
Yeah, and right now, but the thing is, right now, I mean, obviously training camp and injuries will factor in. But right now, their top two pairings are slated to be DeHaan and Dougie Hamilton and Slavin and Pesce. That means almost $5 million defenseman and Justin Falk will be on the bottom pairing. Now, maybe he'll get power play time, but I think Hamilton will probably be the first power play guy. I mean, you may be right, Russ. They may hold on to Falk until the deadline because he's a right-hand shot defenseman. He's experienced. He's offensive, and they maybe can maximize what they get for him. But I would have thought they would have held on to Skinner, and they didn't. Right now, I question all the decisions made with Carolina because some of them just don't seem to be the right ones.
They're also slotting again. You're accounting for them probably going to have Andrei Svechnikov in the lineup.
Yeah.
That's, you can say it's a little bit of a gamble. Zykov, who obviously Russ and I saw playing against the Phantoms with Charlotte. Zykov's, potentially going to be figuring into this. It's when you get a little lower in the lineup where it gets kind of a little bit more interesting when you're playing like a Michael Furland on the second line in this case, where he might be a little bit better on a third line situation. So forward-wise, I definitely get your concern there, Michael. I definitely do, because once you get down the line 4, it gets a little bit dicey when you have a Jordan Martinook in this case, who's an interesting player, and Victor Rask. But again, defensively, I think they can sort of, if Falk is still there, they can still sort of dribs and drabs a little bit of Fleury, not throwing him in too much. And then as he goes along,
right,
looks really good. Then potentially you begin to examine chipping off Falk.
Plus, Falk's going to get his minutes.
He's going to have to. Yeah, he's not going to be down in third pairing. If anything, I could see Pesci potentially being down a little further.
Falk's still going to play, Falk minutes. I don't see him, suddenly being a legitimate third pairing. I just think that's, because of the they have a really good defense now.
Yeah, it would be a waste to put him down there.
You have to showcase him, Mike. If you're going to try to trade him, you have to make sure
you have to have him play his role. Yeah,
right. And I agree that Hamilton is a great power play performer, but Falk's got that shot. He's got to get his time too. So yeah.
Okay. As I'm chewing ice, sorry. The salary arbitration situation over the last week or so has gotten pretty interesting. The numbers came out for William Karlsson for Vegas, and as with some of the Ottawa Senators players, the gulf you could drive a Mack truck through. Vegas offered $3.5 million for a guy who scored 43 goals last year. The agent for Karlsson asked for $6.5 million, so that probably is headed for some sort of settlement, or they'll go to the hearing and determine what that will be, and probably end up in the middle. Cody Cece's award with Ottawa is expected today. It doesn't appear that Ottawa is going to settle, but they did settle with Mark Stone, and this is the interesting one. It was just below the high watermark for arbitration awards. Shea Weber was $7.5 million a few years ago. Stone settles for a 1 year, $7.35 million award, 1 year contract. Now, this is the interesting thing, Kevin. Now, Ottawa, in the tenuous position that they are, you look at them right now, Matt Duchene, Stone, and Erik Karlsson, all in the final years of their contracts, all UFAs. You couldn't pay me enough to be Pierre Dorian right now.
Yeah, no, he's in a bad situation. And the only thing I would say is that there's been talk that Duchene would like to stay there. But that's just not a good situation to be in when your team's on way down. Obviously, Erik Karlsson is not going to be there. What's the lure for players to re-sign there? And that's I think they sort of need Stone. You got to sell hope to the fans that that the turnaround is not going to take forever. So that's a real tough situation. And I agree with you. I wouldn't want to be Dorian right now.
I mean, Russ, right now it's like Stone. He's 1 year away from being a complete free agent at age 27. If Ottawa wants to keep him, they're going to have to overpay him. So we're probably talking $8.5–9 million on a long-term deal if they want to get him locked up.
Yeah, he'll want like 8.25 for 8. Like that's what he'll want. The thing about it is, if you remember, I said I thought Stone would set the record at 7.75. I think Ottawa was worried about that, and that's why they settled on that number. Because and so this way they could at least save something, and it wouldn't go to arbitration. Because that, again, some people thought it was crazy that he got that number, but again, 18, I think, of his 20 goals were even strength. He's their best assist guy other than Karlsson.
Right.
Like, he is their engine of that team. You lose Mark Stone, that team is the worst in the league.
Yeah, you're so.
Yeah, at least from my perspective, again, when looking at with Stone, again, as soon as you saw the arbitration numbers at $5 million for the Senators and $9 million for him, you knew $7 million, somewhere in that $7 million range was going to end up being the difference. It was just a case of if you could give him a little bit more to avoid that meeting. As soon as I saw what the number was this morning, I said that's exactly basically what happened. It was a way to literally sort of split the difference to make sure he doesn't get the record number,
right,
but get a deal in place for him to play during the season. So now the Sens are in just a really interesting spot right now for you guys in this case. They're going
Kevin, are you of the opinion that it's sort of the line is passed with Karlsson, where teams, if there are interested teams out there, they realize that there is no trading for him and extending him, that he's a pure 1-year rental, and that's probably what Ottawa is going to get in return for him?
Yeah, it sure seems that way. Yeah, and you can't blame them. I mean, the reason this is set up this way is so that top players can, exercise free agency still during the prime of their careers. And interestingly enough, amazingly enough, really, that it hasn't worked that way in the NHL and the salary cap. Most of them have chosen not to explore free agency and have re-upped with their team. So, it's really going to be interesting. We just had John Tavares, obviously,
right?
He did, and now we're going to see Carlson. It looks like, it will be a very similar type situation where it'll come down to where he feels he best fits. And I don't blame Carlson for wanting to test the market and seeing what's out there, because everything could be changed dramatically,
right,
in a season.
Well, so, do you? And I want everybody's thought on this. Do you think? And I know that Eck and I talked about this on one of the shows last week. Do you think that the Tavares signing with Toronto is sort of a paradigm shift in the league, where now the star players are going to be more willing, like in the NBA or in Major League Baseball, they'll be more willing to pick up stakes and move, or this was a one-off where the Islanders were just a disaster and he had to move or wanted to move and ended up going to his hometown team? I mean, I personally think that, you're going to see Carlson move, but I think that, maybe Tyler Seguin moves. I mean, I think there's more of a willingness of these really big, impactful players to maybe try other places.
Yeah. I still think for the most part, teams are going to be able to keep their players. The hardest thing now, and we've talked about this before, but it's just the truth. And that is that, what drives people in terms of searching for another venue is the desire to win usually. Mm-hmm. And that's harder to predict. Like, hey, are the Maple Leafs an up and rising team? For sure. Tavares had every reason to go to Toronto, but it's no slam dunk. They're one of 6 or 8 or 10 teams that, could win it. It's just much harder to predict. So I think that's why you end up now with players that the number one driving force, while winning is still the backdrop of it all, it's where they feel like they're going to get the best opportunity, or their family fits well, or they fit well, or they like the line mates, or, issues that before wouldn't have been as big an issue are much bigger now. So I think that's going to, like you're talking about Seguin, with Seguin, and the Stars believe they're going to get him re-signed. But for him, it's just a matter of, hey, do I love Dallas or don't I? And I think that's what the case is.
Yeah, and their advantage is that Spezza's contract is expiring at the end of the year, so that opens up like $7.5 million, so they can afford it. Ross, what do you think?
Well, the one thing that I'm noticing is there's no team that players will go to play cheap anymore. Like that, it happens in other sports, but in the NHL, there really isn't that team now, other than Brooks Orpik, but that you knew that was going to happen because he had been there previously. But other than that, it's really not happening. Like, nobody's flocking to the Penguins because they think they'll do it again. Nobody's signing like a ridiculously dirt cheap 1-year deal to go. Right now, everybody's getting their money. Now, do I think that's because of the lockout looming? Yeah, I do. And I think they're trying to get, as much in as they can before that, in case it either happens or it starts a season late and they lose some money. But I think that's a big factor in the league now, the parity.
Yeah, we've already seen, I think, in the NHL in the past where, if we're using that NBA equivalency here, Michael, I think to Kevin's word again, in terms of the fact that, teams are looking, players are looking to win, obviously. We're not going to have that Colorado Avalanche, joining of Paul Kariya and Teemu Selanne with Sakic and Forsberg. Right. But I don't think we're going to see much of that because, again, to what Russ just said, I think the lockout and financial, a solid situation, I think, does work. That said, I do think that, again, with Tavares, it was a unique situation, I think, and it worked. It was the team's on the rise. They're winning. He's going to be a big part of what potentially comes in the future for that team. So winning, I still think, does trump things, but when you have the NBA doesn't have the same sort of situation where things are looming lockout wise for them. They've already, whereas the NHL does.
I think you'll still have the vet. I think you could have veterans pick and choose their places. Guys who haven't won Stanley Cups would want to go to
but they're
Toronto
also further along age-wise in a lot of cases, whereas in the NBA, guys that are moving that are younger.
Right, and that was the point I was gonna make, is the fact that, like, and I'm just using it as an example, like how Chris Kunitz went to Tampa. Somebody could go to Toronto or Tampa because they think they have a chance to win a Stanley Cup. But what you see right now going on in Toronto, and I know that Eck had a problem with Kyle Dubas being confident that they get all these guys signed on contracts. Well, Kyle Dubas is being very patient when it comes to William Nylander, and I could sense a little bit of frustration in when I was up at the Smash Fest on Wednesday with the fact that he said, talk to Kyle about the contract. He wants to get a contract done, but he wants a long-term deal, and he wants a certain amount of money, and he probably is not going to get what he wants from the Leafs because they have to sign Marner and Matthews and deal with Jake Gardner's contract. There's a number of factors. So I think general managers are sort of going to wait out some of their free agents and try to fit things in. And that's the reality of a hard salary cap.
Yep.
So, okay, let's touch on a couple of other things. Russ, you said that the Hughes brothers are lighting it up at the World Junior Summer Showcase.
Yeah. Quinn Hughes right now is playing at a level that, like, nobody in that camp is playing at. And so, like, he's literally his stop and go ability, his ability to weave in and out of other players, basically he can wait till the last possible second to get somebody open for a game-winning goal like a Josh Norris. Like, it's crazy. But again, this is where I caution people, because again, this is the first time guys have been on the ice in a while. What you see now is not always what you see from players, as far as if they don't look great, they'll usually get better. I don't know if Quinn Hughes could look any better. Like, that's the scary part. Now, Jack Hughes, same thing. I mean, there is this telepathy that definitely exists between the Hughes brothers, like the Sedins. And if I was Vancouver, I would already be trying to figure out a way how to get the other one there somehow.
Hughes.
Yeah. So, but even if that doesn't happen, it's amazing to see it. And Jack is, Jack's not the biggest guy. He's 166 pounds, and he did get knocked down by Adam Ginning, and Ginning kind of looked over him like a Radko Gudas might, and he smiled, and he didn't get hurt. He got back up, and it was fine. And actually, Ginning went to the penalty box, which is the worst possible thing you could do with the Hughes brothers on the power play. But at the end of the day, Craig Button had the best line that I heard. And somebody was like, well, I think it was Gord that basically said, well, where do you see Jack Hughes down the road? What do you see him weigh? And he goes, well, he's 166 now. He'll probably weigh 168. Like, that's, these guys are not, they're skinny guys, but their skating and the way they think and the way they use their edges is so good, it really doesn't matter. And that's why I always go back to Sam Girard, and I say Sam Girard's playing in the NHL at 155 pounds. He has not gained anything. He might be getting stronger. You could definitely gain strength. And I think these guys do gain strength just because you're turning into a man and you gain strength. Yeah. But at the end of the day, it's not like, these guys are going to put on 20 pounds of muscle.
And I think a guy like Jeff Skinner has proved, I mean, he's what, 160 pounds? He's not a big guy. He's not a tall guy. He's not built like a fire plug like a Nathan Gerby. He's a slight guy, but he's incredibly quick. He makes great cuts, and he's extremely talented. And Mitch Marner, I remember the first training camp, Mitch Marner in 2016, at the development camp in July, he was like 162 pounds, and he says, I want to be 170 by training camp. And when I talked to him at training camp, he wouldn't tell me what his weight was because he was no close to 170.
Yeah, and we had seen him at the rookie photo shoot like a month and a half before training camp, and we knew he wasn't going to make it.
Well, whenever there's discussions about weight, I point out that, I covered Steve Eisenman's first training camp. I still have the story that I wrote about him, and I quoted Jimmy Devellano saying Steve Eisenman showed up at 153 pounds in training camp. Now, the game is different now, but it was rough. It was a rough game in the 1980s, and Steve Eisenman, put on muscle, got heavier, but he was a dominant player as a rookie. Hughes is going to be fine, and almost every scout you talk to echoes just what Russ basically said, is that or Craig Button, doesn't really matter what he weighs. He's still going to be dominant.
Okay, one more thing. We talked about this yesterday, and I'm not sure. I mean, we know that Seattle is going to be the next expansion franchise. It's only a matter of time, but there was a report out of Seattle regarding the Key Arena renovation and the amount of that would cost for the renovation went up $100 million. And they believe that it could delay things a little bit when it comes to getting that building ready for the NHL. And also the NBA, which they have aims of bringing an NBA franchise back to Seattle. Kevin, what have you heard in terms of a timetable for them announcing Seattle and when they expect them to be in the league?
Well, it's interesting. When that came out, I actually looked at a story that I did about Seattle, and they admitted, this was several months ago, that was a possibility, that the building that still needed to be finalized. And Gary Bettman has been very consistent about, it'll get done when it gets done. Like, I don't think, I think you have a timetable and fans have a timetable, but I don't think the league actually really does. Like, there's no, pressing reason for them to rush them in. So if it takes a little bit longer, I think they're fine with that as impression that I have.
Russ, what do you think of the timetable is, or what do you think they hope the timetable is?
Well, I mean, again, we talked about it the other day. As long as this extra $100 million isn't a big deal, they're expecting them to break ground sometime, to start working on it sometime next year. Whether that's, and that's a broad thing, right? It could be right after the new year. It could be late in the year. But, if that's the case, they'll be ready by, like, what they think, 2020.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's true. I mean, I don't think there's anyone suggesting that it's not. But I'm saying if it was delayed, I don't think the NHL would lose enthusiasm.
No, I don't think so either. But, you know how it is with these ownership groups. They'll never tell you until it's dire that, yeah, you know what? It's a little bit behind schedule, but again, the $100 million could do it. Like $100 million is enough to say, all right, maybe we gotta,
And NHL GMs are also not going to would certainly be fine, no problem. The longer you delay it, the happier they'll be with regards to trying to figure out, who it is they will potentially lose in an expansion draft. It gives them more time to plan.
Yeah,
and I guarantee you there will not be a draft setup like George McPhee had. Like, no. They're not giving up multiple players this time, and the player like James Neal, if we redid that draft, Hoyle would have traded James Neal to another team before he would have lost him. That's my theory. I think they thought they were going to be able to make a deal with McPhee, and it never really happened. I think the GMs are going to approach this completely different. I pity. They'll still get a decent team, but they're not going to get what Vegas got.
Yeah, to quote Scotty from Star Trek, "Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me." Yeah. Now the one thing with Seattle that'll be interesting, and I'm reading too much into it, Kev, but with the CBA, the ending in 2022, right now, that $650 million that the league will get is not considered hockey-related revenue. So I would think that if there's a delay, fine, but they want to get that team in there before 2022 because I have a feeling that the PA would use that as an issue to get a part of that money as part of any new CBA.
Well, I mean, I think it's logical to suggest that. Bill Daley has been asked about that in the past pertaining to the timing of Seattle and the CBA, and he has been, adamant that they don't even think about how that works in terms of the CBA. And it would be hard for me to believe that the PA could win that from the league. I just don't see them giving in on that.
I agree, but I mean, I almost think that the NHL used the not going to the Olympics as something that they could add on as leverage against the PA for the next negotiation. So I'm sure they'll use anything they can get their hands on as an issue to use as leverage going the other way. Because I think it's a non-issue for the NHL regarding the Olympics in 2022. But they're going to play at saying, well, we're not going to go and probably use it as some sort of,
Yeah,
piece.
I would agree with that.
But they have that out, Mike, after the 1920 season. I mean, they could start playing it then. I mean, that's the one that I'm talking about them being afraid of. I think if they get past that, 2022 will be okay. I think they'll actually agree on something. But if we start hearing, at the end of this season that they need to think about what they're going to do with that option for the following season, then that's when you start to worry a little.
Yeah, I don't know what we're going to fight about. Are we going to fight about length of contracts?
There's always something, Kev. We think logically, and then there's always something that comes up.
The length of contract will be a major issue. I could see owners saying, we want to go down to 5 and 6.
Right.
No, like that. So I think that'll be an issue. But the split of the money, like that has worked. Like, how could either side be unhappy with that?
Well, the players hate escrow, though. You know that.
Well, but you can't do. I mean, I agree with that, but I say this all the time to agents, and nobody has an answer to this. There's no way to do a salary cap without an escrow. Like it can't be done.
Well, unless you do a real cap dollar for dollar, and there's no way to circumvent it because every dollar you spend is the actual cap hit. Yeah. I think then you might be able to come to some sort of agreement, but they don't seem to want that because they would rather hire good capologists to figure out a way to circumvent it so they could spend more money. But why can't a cap be dollar for dollar?
Well, because players don't want that too. Players want them spending
right
as well. That's why I'm saying there's just no way around it. And escrow, it's just the way we all live with escrow every year with our mortgages.
Yeah, and earlier in the week, Kevin, I wrote about at the baseball trade deadline. I mean, there was a lot of movement, and I've complained the last couple of years that the NHL trade deadline is sort of anticlimactic because there's not a lot of moves because there's not a lot of cap space, and how the league, and nothing can be changed until a new CBA, but how the league could sort of, I'm not saying do an end around, but how they could improve the trade deadline and make it easier for teams to have players move. And trading cap space like Major League Baseball does with the international signing pool, or, have sort of a similar to a Larry Bird exemption from the NBA. I called it the Butch Goring exemption, where if you trade an expiring contract, it doesn't count against the cap. Something like that. I know those are end arounds to the hard cap, but it allows teams who are, budget teams to trade cap space or to get something for nothing. And it allows teams who want to spend money to spend money. I don't see the downside from either side.
Well, we're already doing that. I mean, we trade players, the Datsuks and the Prongers, and we're doing that now. So we're allowing legalized cap circumvention.
Sure.
So why don't we just add another layer to it? Yeah. No, that's a fair point.
Okay, guys, great show. We will be back next week with another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast. For Anthony Mangione, for Kevin Allen, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thank you for watching, and have a good weekend. And remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.